Welcome to Executive Access, created for motivated professionals. This is your home for real talk with executives about their career journeys, leadership practices, successes, and learnings along the way. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today, we'll hear from Paula Hodgins, Head of Global Sales, Service, and Customer Success of Tanzu Division of VMware by Broadcom. Paula epitomizes the idea that it's always the best thing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. She is one of the most principled leaders I know. And so I asked her to break down the how and why behind that. She also talks about how senior leaders can avoid the leadership echo chamber, the power of teamwork, and how she recently learned some things around leading through significant change. I always learn something every time I speak with Paula, and I know you will as well. Let's dive in. Paula Hodgins, welcome to Executive Access. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm really happy to be here. It's good to see you.
You too. You are the Head of Global Sales, Services, and Customer Success for the Tanzu Division of VMware by Broadcom. You lead all go-to-market functions globally. Prior to that, you were the president and managing director at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Canada. And prior to that, when I met you, a distinguished, prestigious 13-year career at Microsoft, including general manager of Azure Sales Canada. So fantastic resume. I'm impressed. But I also know that throughout your journey, you're very passionate about mentoring and supporting diversity in technology. Is that right? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. Look, the tech industry is very well known to be, quite male dominated. And as a woman coming up in that industry, there's unique challenges that you face. And I've had support along the way from a lot of talented women and men who saw the best in me, who took me aside, gave me advice, helped me out along the way. And through that, I learned a lot. And so for me, it's about giving back, helping others who are trying to come up the ranks, learn from what I've learned, and giving their support. And to me, that makes it really meaningful and really a big part of why I'm so proud to be in the position I am today. It's not just about achieving what I want to achieve for my business and my team, but also, guiding others as they come up through the ranks.
That's amazing. When I was coming up through the ranks, it was always so important to me to see the role models, and you're certainly an amazing role model for everybody coming up, women and men and everybody. So that's amazing. Before we get into a lot of questions I have about your background and leadership, I'm curious to know what you're working on learning and growing right now, like, personally, professionally, because I know you're always moving.
What am I not working on? I'm like a constant work in progress. Look, I think I'm always working on different things, and professionally right now, I've been through a lot of change. So I was at VMware for a couple of years when they were acquired by Broadcom. Well-published acquisition. And so that acquisition went through in November. And so coming in from, one company to another company through such a big acquisition it's pretty intense, and it's full of change, different cultures, different ways of doing things, different systems and tools, different corporate priorities, so many changes. And so for me, professionally, what I've been working on, there's this great Stephen Covey quote that really means something to me right now. And it's the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing, which can be confusing when you first listen to it. But when you really absorb it, it really is about are you clear on what the main thing is you do well? And are you making it your main thing? And so through this acquisition, that's been like a sobering thought I've had as a leader over and over again, because there's this tendency to make everything a top priority, to make everything important, to want to chase every shiny object. And at the end of the day, what's really important is being really good at what you're good at as an organization, as a business, and not letting yourself get distracted from that. And so it's been a really good lesson for me as a leader. I mean, I've known that, but sometimes you get to relearn lessons in life. And I'm relearning this lesson and the importance of that discipline about making your main thing your actual main thing. So that's what I've been working on most recently through all of this change with an acquisition, which to be honest with you, is more change I've ever seen or experienced as a leader happening all at once. So that's been professionally. Personally, I am working on strength training. So I've always been like this cardio junkie. I've run marathons. I love cycling. I, love getting out and staying fit. But, strength training has been something I've been like intimidated by. So I've really committed myself to like actual strength training, like heavier weights, a routine. And as intimidating as that's been, it's been great. So that's what I'm working on personally.
That's amazing. I think we're living parallel lives because, well, I'm definitely have questions for you around your main thing. But, last year I picked up Stephen Covey's 7 Habits book. I hadn't read that thing in years and something turned me on to that. And I'm like, yes, to all of this and just reading it with fresh eyes. I think that is a classic for a reason. And I started lifting weights myself last month. And I thought I was strong because I was doing all this body weight stuff. And then it was very humbling. I realized how not strong I am all of a sudden. What happened? And so I'm on the same journey as you.
And then after like 30 plus years of sitting in a desk, a lot of time, my mobility is horrific. Like things I should be able to do that I just can't do anymore. So it's very humbling. It's a very humbling experience.
Thanks for sharing. Well, just real quick, I thought it would be fun to reminisce on how I remember you and how I remember first meeting you, or at least early when we worked together, because it was more than 10 years ago when we first met. And those were in the wild and woolly days of dynamics. And we were kind of felt like a startup and we were figuring things out. And things were definitely not at all process oriented. And you came into the business and you just brought this enterprise sales mindset that we really didn't have that much at the time, and good process, good energy. And you were and I felt like I was like all over the place, like, and you were just this calm voice of reason and all the time. And so that's how I remember you.
It's funny. I don't remember feeling that way. First of all, I mean, I think it was, Jamie, I want to say it was 15 years ago or more, or maybe even 16, because I benchmark it with my kids. My daughter is now 60, turning 16, and I think I just had her. I was pregnant with her, so it's been a long time. And I remember, so first of all, I remember thinking and looking back now even more, what a dream team we had to work with. The leaders on that team at that time, at Microsoft, there's these moments in your career where you really get to come together with a set of individuals who are so talented and where you actually function well as a team. And believe it or not, it's quite rare. And as I look back, 15, 16 years later, I realized how special that time was when we worked together. And I remember everyone was just so driven. Everyone was so smart, but we all, I think, gave each other space to lead. We treated each other with respect. We all had a common goal. And even though we all had, sometimes there were differences, we all got in the same boat and made it work. And I think it was really special. I remember feeling completely out of my depth, right? Being parachuted into this role where my job was, hey, bring process, bring order, bring consistency to how we run the business. And it was the Wild West, right? I was working with leaders that were way more experienced than I was, and really bringing in and saying, hey, this is how we need to run our business. This is what we need to start looking at. These are the health markers we're going to anchor on. This is going to be the rhythm of the business we're going to follow. And I can remember meeting some pretty big resistance from leaders who just never operated their business that way, right? And so for me, being a much younger and less experienced leader at the time, for me, it was like a personal journey on how do I influence these really successful leaders who are proven and have, are in these big roles when I'm a much more junior leader who on paper doesn't have the experience, but can bring something to them that should hopefully help them when they may not be interested in the help at the time I was, bringing it to them. So it was an interesting tightrope for me to walk, but ultimately it was a ton of fun and a huge leadership challenge.
Yes. Well, I do remember that dream team. And, it's interesting that you describe it that way, because one of the big things I was so excited to ask you about today is about principled leadership. And I've reflected a lot on leadership over the past couple of years and have this idea that truly anything is possible. I've seen that. And I think it's anything is possible when you walk in power. And one of the biggest things is principled leadership. And when I think about you, Paula, you could write a book on that. And I see you as somebody that's always putting customers at the center, team at the center, and what you're just describing, doing the right thing at the center, even if it means you might be annoying, your coworkers. Some of them, might be a little bit more senior than you. And so there's like a power dynamic going on. That was your brand back then. And when we reconnected a few years ago, it was funny. I was like, wow, it's the same Paula, but it's like Paula 3.0. You're even more amazing now through your experience. And I'm really curious, am I characterizing a tenet of your leadership or your philosophy around that principled leadership the right way? Because that's how I experience you.
I mean, first of all, thank you for saying that. I am definitely a work in progress. And I think back to those days, sort of 15, 16 years ago, I think I was much more of a blunt instrument in terms of how I drove change or, how I brought ideas forward. And there's definitely nuance to it. But I think like in my heart and who I am hasn't changed. And you're right. And so there is a big part of me that is focused on doing the right thing. And I bring that philosophy with me to work every day. I can't separate it from who I am. That's how I show up personally, and that's how I show up professionally. And when you anchor on do the right thing, it can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean do the right thing for your customers, do the right thing for your team, do the right thing for your company and shareholders. And essentially, to me, it's always been what's motivated me to do the hard things, because doing the right thing quite often means it's the hard road, not the easy road. So pushing the easy button and getting something done and not necessarily doing the right thing, which could be more time consuming, more difficult, more complicated. I've never opted for the easy button. Typically, it's like, let's do the right thing. And so I think for me, it's been a way that I've been able to deliver results that are more meaningful, that are the right set of results, that may not be in the short term what people want to see, but in the long term, it's the right thing. And so, there's a challenge with that as well, because sometimes you do need to do things in the short term that may not be the right thing for the long term. So then, how do you negotiate the difference between the two? So that has been my approach and remains my approach, because again, that is core to who I am as an individual.
Well, it's so obvious to anybody that works with you, and even my experience, just reconnecting with you in the last couple of years. But how do you do that, right? I mean, how do you navigate a situation where maybe the entire momentum of the team is going in one direction, and you're sitting there saying, "Wait a minute, I'm not sure this is the right idea," and there's so many challenges. Like, how do you navigate that scenario, still doing the right thing, being yourself, and thinking about all these constituents, your team, your customers, your shareholders at the company?
First of all is to really understand the heart of the problem you're trying to solve. So to do the right thing, I think you've got to be clear on what is the thing that you're trying to solve for, right? So I think a lot of times people get confused about what is the problem that they're trying to fix. And is this something that needs to be managed, or is this something that truly needs to be fixed? And knowing the difference between the two, because some issues just need to be managed. They don't need to actually be fixed. So I think it's about getting clarity on what is the purpose and what it is you're trying to achieve. And, funny enough, a lot of times when you peel the onion, there just isn't that clarity. So to me, it's always been easier to do the right thing or to lead with principles or values when you're really clear about what it is that you're either trying to solve or what it is you're trying to achieve. And that sounds basic, but it's a lot harder. It's harder than it sounds. So to do that, I think you really have to get to, asking a ton of questions, really dissecting the issues. I think you need to ask a lot of different people opinions. So, don't create this echo chamber where you're hearing just from one set of people, one side of the problem. So I think it's about creating an environment where there's trust and where you can have a dialogue to really get underneath of what's actually happening. So it becomes easier to do the right thing when you've done that work first. And again, you really understand what is it that you're trying to do. And then there's a simplicity and an ease about doing the right thing. And in doing that, you get people on board with you as well.
Oh, I can't let that go. You have to tell me more about how you get people on board. I mean, I love that you started with values, because I find that even when there's disagreement, if you go up high enough, right, and say, let's forget the tactical stuff for a second, and you go up high enough, you can find something that everybody can agree on. Like, we put our customers first, or we are always going to prioritize this over that, right? So I can definitely see how what you're talking about, really digging in with the critical thinking, asking the questions, hearing from lots of people can create unity. But can you say any more about specifically how that works?
I think, I'll use the context I'm in right now at Broadcom, right? We're coming in, we're making a ton of change. We're, in some cases, we're changing strategy about what we're doing, and people can get confused. They can lose sight of what at a very top level it is we're trying to achieve together and why. And so when you have that kind of churn in the organization, when you're asking people to do really hard things, but they lost the connection to why it's the right thing and why you're asking them to do it. I think that's the thread that ties a leader to their team together that gets broken. That's that trust that gets lost. So for me, what I've learned to do, and I honestly, James, I don't always do it well, but I'm well-intentioned in trying to do this, and I said it before, take the time to listen and understand the point of view of different constituents within the organization so that you can really understand and incorporate that into the decision-making. Take the time to explain the why and how what you're doing is connected to that greater purpose, because, it might be obvious to you as a leader because you've been talking about it, you've been looking at this problem for so long, and then you're like the last mile when you're rolling it out, like you forget that the people that you're rolling it out to are just seeing it for the first time, and all the time you've had as a leader to like get used to the problem and figure out the solution, they haven't had the benefit of that. So now you're just sort of pushing it down to them. So like, be mindful of the change process and how people need to absorb information and change, and the process around which that it's important to give them time and space to understand the why as well. So I think those are really critical things in making these connections.
I think that's great. Understanding other people's points of views and being open, right? I hear you implying that, you're not just trying to impose your will on everybody. It's a sincere desire to learn through the questions, through asking others, and then connecting the why. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So I love that. Executive Access is brought to you by The Ideal Life. The Ideal Life offers a multimedia platform that is focused on cultivating a growth mindset. Here you'll find a supportive community, valuable content, and transformative coaching aimed at helping you live a more gratifying and joyful life. Ready to take the next step in your personal growth journey? Visit theideallife.com to explore their wealth of resources and join their vibrant, growing community today. You know, you brought up your blog. I read your blog about avoiding the leadership echo chamber. By the way, for my listeners, on LinkedIn, Paula writes articles, and every single one of them is well worth your read. They're like 3 or 4 minutes, and they're so full of wisdom. But this one in particular, avoiding the leadership echo chamber, it talks about being careful about, as you become a senior leader, how you avoid that echo chamber. And I'm just so curious for you to describe that, and we can go from there.
So first of all, thank you. It's fun to write these little blogs, and they really are like, 2 minutes. So they don't take a lot of time. But the echo chamber one, I really felt compelled to write about one because I've so often observed leaders who surround themselves with people who think just like that and who really do what they say, as opposed to create an environment where there's healthy debate and dialogue, where there's different points of view that can be freely discussed and debated, where better decisions are made. And it's so tempting as a leader because you have to move so fast, right? There's so much pressure to make decisions. There's so much pressure to make good decisions. Everything is a priority. Everything is an emergency, and you've got to move quickly. And there's so much temptation as a leader to kind of surround yourself with people who make it easy to just move fast, as opposed to make it easy to make good decisions, which may take more time because they need to be better thought out. There needs to be more consideration because they're not all just agreeing with everything you say. And it takes courage, I think, as a leader to look for an altering opinion and to seek out those who have a completely different perspective as you and are willing to challenge you. Because you can get stuck in this rut where people become afraid to disagree with you because they're afraid that it would affect, how you perceive them or what kind of bonus you get. And it's back to this easy button idea. It's easier just to say yes than it is to say yes if, or no, or have you thought, or have you considered this? And so leaders, I think, really need to be careful. I think it's the most dangerous thing as a leader to create this echo chamber for yourself, because you lose sight of what's not working. You lose sight of really what's happening at the ground level. And potentially, it doesn't always happen, but potentially you could set yourself up to make some decisions that just aren't based on fact or what you desire things to be, not what they actually are.
That's great. And as a senior leader, I remember as I grew and became a senior leader, I never saw myself as a senior leader. To me, I was just the same, goofy Jamie Tazi. But I realized that maybe it was my title, or maybe it was how infrequently sometimes people saw me. There was a little bit of trepidation. So as a senior leader, what advice do you have? So if a senior leader is out there saying, I want that, I want to make sure I don't create an echo chamber, what are the things that they can do to make sure that they are approachable for their team to come and share things?
Now, I always, or frequently, always is such a big word, but I frequently say to my team, like, this is a discussion open for debate. Sometimes it's good to set parameters around, hey, we're making a decision and this is open for discussion. This is open for debate. Like, I'm looking for alternative perspectives. So be declarative with your team and others on, you are actually interested in different points of view, not just in an affirmation of what you've already decided. So be clear. And there's also some decisions that are made that you actually aren't looking for feedback on. And there's good reasons for that as well. But I would be clear, and I am clear with my team on, look, I need feedback. This needs to be debated. So I think that's one tactic, just to be super direct. Another would just be just show up as a human being and be vulnerable, right? So, when you admit, hey, I didn't think that through, I could have thought that through better, I didn't consider that opinion, you use language like that with your team or with others, it really humanizes you as a leader and essentially signals to people that the door is open. Even if you don't invite it, the door is open in terms of your leadership style for alternative points of view other than yours, because you admit that you don't know everything. And that is, I think, a disarming leadership style for others that feel like would make them more confident in disagreeing with you. Because I do think it's scary for subordinates to disagree with their leader. That doesn't work out for people sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so funny. I just saw somebody posted on LinkedIn. I remember when Jamie used to say something like, help me understand. And I said, wow, did I really say that a lot? But I think that relates. And I also like the question, what are you seeing that I'm not? I have this analogy that as I moved into coaching and I saw that exactly what you're talking about over and over again, I feel like teams of different levels are exactly like teams on different levels of a high-rise building. And the executives are on the 40th floor and their view is amazing. They can see far and wide. Maybe the ground floor people are literally on the ground floor, first or second floor. They can't see far and wide. They don't have the power of that view, but their view is really powerful. And sometimes they don't realize it, right? Because they can see detail. And I'm just wondering, so that's great advice for the senior leaders. What advice would you have for, the earlier in career people who have sort of conviction about something that they're wondering, does anybody know that this is really happening? What advice would you give them for how to approach communicating that in a way that can be heard by the senior leader?
Now I'm higher up the ranks. I so appreciate when anyone at any level within the organization comes to me with insight, because I'm always looking for insight. Back to kind of my leadership style, which is, hey, you've got to do the right thing, but to do the right thing, you have to actually know the problem. You have to know what's actually going on. And so first of all, I'm very appreciative when anyone, I don't care what their title is within the organization, have true insight or ideas that could further our cause, right? That can help us get to where we're trying to be. So I would just advise anyone, again, doesn't matter your title, to be brave, right? Choose courage over comfort. I think it's important to well articulate your thoughts, and context is important, right? So if you're at all hands and, there's a way to phrase a question that it can be absorbed and answered, right? As opposed to if you're in one-on-one, you might ask the question differently. So there's a context and nuance that you need to consider in terms of how you communicate. But I think it's just being, clear and concise and thoughtful, and to realize that people do want to hear what you have to say. So I would look for opportunities to do that. And I would absolutely encourage anyone to bring their thoughts and ideas forward.
I'm just remembering early in the interview, you talked about yourself as being more of a blunt object earlier in your career, and you've honed that. Can you spend a little bit there? Are there any things, you don't have to share some deep, embarrassing moments. I mean, my gosh, I could share 1,000, but, are there any learnings that you took along the way around, you as a blunt object and how you were able to learn from them for some of our listeners?
A bit what I was talking about in terms of the nuance of communication, right? So as well-intended as I was, like, I saw something that, oh gosh, this really needs to be done, or this is really important for me to articulate. Like, if you just blurt it out in a meeting and you're not mindful of if you're, maybe the person who invented the thing that you're saying isn't working is standing right next to you and you're calling your baby ugly. It's not to make over so well. So I think, like, earlier in my career, I think I didn't appreciate as much the nuance of communication, and because I've always just been, like, focused on, oh, we've got to fix it, we've got to get it working, right? But that doesn't always work if you don't consider, how you communicate, the right forum, the right message, making sure that you're doing it in a way that you can bring people on the journey with you, as opposed to creating adversaries, right? You don't want it to be an us versus them. This is the right way, your way is the wrong way. Or how are we going to learn this together? And there's no right way or wrong way. And how do we, use our different perspectives to work toward a common goal and find an outcome that works? And so I think like earlier in my career, because I am so highly principled, that's where I got caught up, was, so highly principled on that I got it. It was right. And, in some cases I wasn't right. Or if I was, maybe I didn't deliver the message in the right way with the right nuance. So I've learned a ton through my career on how to communicate, how to work more cooperatively toward a common outcome where there's no winners and losers, right? It's a team and we're doing it together. Because I think when you frame things that way, when you are highly principled, it does create sort of this adversarial dynamic where then no one wins, because it just becomes about people entrenching their positions as opposed to reaching across with you and realizing that actually they need to evolve their thinking as well, and that you can do it together cooperatively as opposed to being pitted against each other, if that makes sense. That's been a huge learning for me through my career. And it goes back to sort of who I am as a person, this highly principled person. You can get entrenched in like a right and wrong dynamic, which just is not healthy. And is, I think, the wrong way to approach something.
Wow, that's so amazing, Paula. And just the team dynamics, like focusing on, hey, we're all in this together, kind of gets you all on the same page as somebody, even if you're disagreeing on one point. I think I'm connecting something in my head, and I want to make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm hearing you talk a lot about getting the opinions of others and really understanding another's point of view, and marrying that with what you just said about communication and communicating effectively. If you're going to put an alternative, thought out there, if it could always start with, say you and I are having a discussion. Hey, Paula, here's what I'm hearing you're trying to accomplish, right? And I have an idea that could maybe move us even further along towards that goal. It's going to be received so much better than if it's just your idea disconnected. And I think that's what you mean by context, right? The context has to be there. And if you're not able to fill out that sentence, you really need to check yourself. Like, is what your big idea is really forwarding the goals of what the organization or the leader or whatever is trying to happen? Am I connecting the dots on those? Because you talk a lot about others.
Then it becomes self-indulgent, right? It becomes like, I just have this need to tell my great idea. And that's satisfying myself, my own self-indulgence to like espouse what I think is important. But you're 100% right. Connecting it to the common goal, like this is actually what we're trying to achieve, and how we considered these as potential inputs or solutions, or how we considered these issues that would align to this common goal would be the way I would reframe that, right? And if you can't check the box on that, then absolutely it is one of those things that could be potentially just like a self-indulgent idea that you have that isn't connected to the common goal, that is better not said or better further considered before it's put out there. So that is a great example of like the maturity in terms of, for me, my communication style, for me, my leadership style is being less sort of self-indulgent on, I've got to get this idea out there, and more thoughtful and disciplined about what is this that I'm going to say that it's going to connect to our common goal, that is going to drive a meaningful outcome, and that's worth saying, right? And so where there's upside to saying it. And I think that is the nuance of the communication that I'm talking about for sure.
Excellent. I think that's amazing, Paula. Thank you. You talked about the last little bit of time has been a lot of change for your team. Congratulations to Broadcom, but a lot of change in all of that even. One of my former guests, Connor Martin, talked about just technology in general not being for the faint of heart. There's change everywhere. We talked about, creating clarity. We talked about principled leadership and communicating effectively. Are there any other things that come to mind as you reflect on this past period of change and change management with your team that you think our listeners would benefit from hearing?
I mean, for change is not an individual sport. So I guess, I'm reflecting, and Connor's 100% right. I mean, technology is not for the faint of heart. And then for me, with everything we've gone through, not only with technology, but, I've never been part of such a big change with an acquisition. It's actually it's been a really great learning process for me. I would say, again, and this is one of those things I've always known, but you get to relearn these lessons in your career. And so this is not an individual sport. This is a team sport. And so, the importance of bringing others along, the importance of collaboration, the importance of peer-to-peer learning. This is all really, really critical in order to manage so much change. Individuals in silos, thinking they know it all, it breaks down. So that the level around which you need to learn, adapt, grow, is so big in this environment that if you don't figure out how to broadly communicate, if you can't learn how to bring voices in from across the organization at different levels for opinions, for insights, and if you can't figure out as a team how to prioritize things, it becomes really, really challenging to manage through all the change. So I would say my biggest lesson I've relearned is change is a team sport. It's a team sport.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Learn, adapt, grow. I think that as we grow in our careers, the enemy of all of that experience is curiosity, right? And keeping us, in that phase where you just know every single day. I don't, as much as I don't know everything. And, aligning yourself with the team around you is great advice.
Chamber, right? It's like hubris is the death of every organization, right? It's leaders that think they know it, think they got it, don't ask questions, don't check in, they make decisions that lead the team into a bad situation, right? It's generals that, don't connect with their troops, that lead their battles into sure death. Like it's one of those things where, as a leader, when you start believing your own press and thinking that you know it all, you really start to make decisions, I think, that could be dangerous for the organization. And that gets amplified in a situation where you're dealing with a great amount of change. So it's kind of like, you can be not a great leader through great times, but when things get tough and there's a ton of change, your leadership flaws make bigger ripples. And that's the time when you've really got to lean in and make sure that you're doing the right things as a leader. So again, great change. You've really got to sharpen your skills as a leader.
Excellent. It sounds like you've had a lot of learning and growth over the past couple of years. And I think that's excellent. I think that's great and true wisdom in that. Plus, I was thinking as you were talking, man, as a senior leader, isn't it so much better? Doesn't it feel better to know that you have a team with you and we're going to figure this out together than feel like you have all of this on your shoulders yourself and you have to be the one expert in the room that is setting the direction for everything?
It's so much more fun. I mean, first of all, there is no way I'm going to know it all. I mean, you move from being like a functional leader where you do have a very high level of knowledge in a functional area to an enterprise leader where you're leading many different functions and you're not the functional leader in every area. And I see this as an area where leaders actually fail, where they're really good at functional leadership role, and then they get promoted into this more enterprise leadership role, and they still try to function like a functional leader where they do know everything or they try to know everything. And that is where, you get into the situation where a leader thinks they know it all or they want to know it all, as opposed to, embracing actually the fact that they don't know it all, that they can't know it all, but they need to have really good people on their team that do have expertise and knowledge that they don't, and to give them space to lead, to give them space to provide their ideas and opinions. And then ultimately, yes, certain decisions are made at your level, but these decisions are much better when you create that kind of environment and realize there is no way you're going to know it all. And that's okay.
Excellent. Well, Paula, I do have one final question for you today. I'm asking all my guests. You've given such amazing advice today, so this might be difficult, but if you could only give one piece of advice about being a leader, what would that be?
Mine is so hard, Jamie. I think it would be listen, learn, and lead in that specific order. That would be my big piece of advice.
Perfect. And I actually think that is the perfect way to encapsulate this entire discussion. Well, Paula, I want to thank you for being here today. I know my listeners are so excited to just get to know you a little bit. Like I said, please go check out Paula's blogs on articles on LinkedIn. I have to write another one pretty soon because everybody's going to be craving more.
I've been working too hard. I need to make some time to write one. I learned so much in the past 6 months. I need to write another one. Thank you, Jamie. It's been so wonderful to do this, and thank you for the opportunity. And it's always great to see you.
Likewise. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Please join us every Tuesday as we continue to bring you insider access to executive leadership.